Imagine waiting 6 episodes to finally show your big bad, only to reveal he has no plan. Thrawn. Grand Admiral Thrawn, the man known for his elaborate schemes and plots, apparently has no plan. Yeah, okay, why not? This show is so strangely written that I'd say it should be taught in film school, but I wouldn't want the students to struggle to stay awake. I don't get the point of drawing things out this long, but if you're going to take 6 hours to get to the point, there should at least be some payoff, and there just isn't. Take the opening scene. Set aside the whole thing about these ancient stories about space whales, and the first of the trilogy being the best. Yes, that's in the show, Ahsoka actually says this. Let it go. There's something more important. The lesson of show, don't tell. This entire scene is an explanation for why Ahsoka thinks Sabine went to save Ezra, and it's played like the scene in Empire where Luke goes to save Han and Leia, and Yoda's trying to talk him out of it, but with one notable difference. We get to see Luke do that. We get to see him try, fail, and then have to deal with the aftermath. In Ahsoka, we're told by Huyang and Ahsoka why Sabine betrays them, as if the audience didn't already know that when we saw Sabine go with Baylan. Ahsoka already knows why Sabine went with Baylan. She already knows how much Sabine cares for Ezra. It makes no sense for Ahsoka to sit here and ponder that Sabine must have been fated to make this decision. Well, duh. Obviously. You see how this show has broken my brain? It's got me using 90s slang. But seriously, do you know why those scenes with Luke work while these don't? Because no one sits there telling us why Luke did what he did. We get to see it, and his confrontation with Yoda and Obi-Wan. Those scenes let us know why through Luke's statements, questions, and reactions. This is Writing 101, Show, Don't Tell. Moving on, it goes to Sabine being locked up in a cell. She's pissy about it and tells Baylan that this wasn't part of the deal, but he doesn't care. As he tells Morgan, Sabine might prove useful for something else. What that might be, who knows, cause it definitely doesn't happen in this episode. They finally arrive to the other galaxy and the planet Peridia, and the ring around the planets turns out to be the remains of the space whales. This is where they come to die. Baylan keeps mentioning these stories he heard about the galaxy while at the Jedi Temple, and they're meant to be important, but the show never tells us any of these stories. The opening scene with Ahsoka is about these stories. Huyang even tells her one, but we don't get to hear it. Now, I watched all of Clone Wars, and those stories were never mentioned there. Maybe they were mentioned in Rebels, which I still haven't watched. If that's the case, it'd be nice to have someone, anyone, actually tell one of these stories in this show so we can know what Baylan is talking about. You can't bank on people having watched the previous shows. You need to give context in this one, but one they've sat through waiting for you to get to the point, which you still haven't done in 6 episodes. Baylan, Morgan, Sabine, and Shin take a ship to the planet Peridia, where they meet these Night Sisters on a giant tower that totally doesn't look like a skinny Gondor. Now, I can't even imagine what people who didn't watch Clone Wars would think about this scene, because nothing about the Night Sisters is explained in the show. And this is so outside anything remotely Star Wars related that you can even begin to guess who these women are. So I'm just going to pull right from Wikipedia to explain who they are. Quote, the Night Sisters were a sect of the Witches of Dathomir who embraced the usage of dark arts with their force-driven magics. The Night Sisters were originally members of other witch clans who began to utilize the dark side in defiance of the light side orthodoxy found in the Book of Law, the governing holy text of the Dathomiri. These witches adopted a shamanistic culture that rejected the notion of good and evil, and instead chose to call upon the twin energies of the winged goddess and the fanged god in order to utilize their magics and communicate with the spirit realm. They focused extensively on the art of casting force illusions through illusion spells. That's the context. What's apparently happened is that the Night Sisters on this world, which is supposedly the origin of all the Dathomiri, used their magics to contact Morgan Elsbeth, tell her about Thrawn, and have her build a hyperspace ring for a Star Destroyer. How these Great Mothers, as they're called, managed to contact Morgan, and apparently only Morgan, from a galaxy away is never explained. It doesn't make any sense, because if they can do this, then shouldn't someone as powerful in the Force as Ahsoka or Luke also be able to do this? Shouldn't they be able to sense Ezra and contact him? And if the Great Mothers can communicate back and forth with Morgan, couldn't they have helped Thrawn make tactical plans for the Imperial Remnant while he waited to be rescued? Wouldn't that throw off everyone in the New Republic, since they never suspect that he was still alive, let alone able to communicate from another galaxy? No, see, that would make too much sense. Instead, the Great Mothers are going to double toil and trouble until they realize that Sabine reeks of Jedi and use their creepy balls to drag her down to some prison in the tower. Now, you might wonder how they could tell Sabine was around a Jedi, but not notice Baylan, who was a Jedi for at least 2 decades. Just let that go. We'll get to it later because the better question is, how in the blue hell do they know anything about the Jedi, given that they've been living on a planet in another galaxy for thousands of years? Fortunately, we get this great moment with Shin and Baylan where we finally get some hint of why Baylan's doing all this. He wants some hidden power on the planet. It's still somehow tied to these stories we know nothing about, but damn if Ray Stevenson isn't just stealing the show. And he's just standing there talking. The underuse of this man is criminal. Absolutely criminal, because he is the best thing about this show. Unlike Sabine, where she tries, seemingly out of boredom, to use the Force to open the doors. There's a little bit of a rumble, but it turns out not to be her, but Thrawn's approaching ship. I mean, the show spent all this time making it pretty clear that she can't use the Force, so it's not like she'd suddenly be able to, I don't know, pull a lightsaber to her hand, and then barely 5 minutes later be able to Force throw someone nearly 100 feet in the air, because that would be silly and kind of imply anyone could use the Force, which would literally undermine everything Force related in Star Wars, and that would be really stupid, so of course, that's never gonna happen. Right? Right? Speaking of stupid, we get the grand appearance of Thrawn, complete with stormtroopers chanting his name. Now, I know there have been some changes to the character since Disney took over and added him to their version of Star Wars, but the one I remember was never so vain as to have his troops chant his name. It just comes across as silly. It's also not clear why they're wearing these red straps, but I think the reason is that this connects them with the Great Mothers, or it's a tribute to them or something to that effect. Anyway, the reveal of Elon Dusk was lame. All this build-up, and basically, he just stands there and talks in a calm, quiet voice. That is his character, I know, but there's no impact to that reveal. He's just there, looking like a regular dude in blue makeup with a serious case of pink eye. Oh, and he's got a sidekick named Enoch. Yes, you're right, that's a biblical name, just like Ezra. And no, Enoch won't do anything important or be remotely relevant to the plot. And no, he's not Ezra in disguise, because all those things would be interesting. He's just there. Because. It's at this point that Thrawn notices Baylan, or should I say General Baylan's skull of the Jedi Order, which surprises the Great Mothers. So, to recap, they could sense Sabine had been near a Jedi. They could communicate between galaxies, but they can't tell a former Jedi when he's standing right by them. As you do. The Great Mothers tell Thrawn about Sabine. He has her brought up. They trade banter, but the gist is that Thrawn agrees to let her go to find Ezra. He even gives her back her weapons in a mount that totally doesn't look like a warg that just walked out of Isengard. But this turns out to be another one of Thrawn's plans. He'll let Sabine find Ezra and then have Baylan and Shin kill them both. He's basically turned Baylan's promise on its head. Clever. Sabine just rides in a direction using some device to guide her somewhere, but she gets waylaid by Discount Ronin, who she barely manages to beat. In the scuffle, her mount runs away and her device gets destroyed. Meanwhile, back at Skinny Gondor, Thrawn sends out 2 squads to back up Baylan, and when Morgan asks why not send more, Thrawn says that his numbers have dwindled, so 2 squads will be enough. 2 points. 1, he knows this is wrong. He admits this in the following episodes, that the Jedi are unpredictable and easily turn one's plan into pure disarray, so this whole thing is silly. But 2, you've been trapped in another galaxy for a decade. What, did you just stay on this planet? Did you not explore? Did you send no one out to find out what else is in this galaxy? Are you so in the middle of nowhere that in those 10 years you never got attacked? No contact with anyone other than the Great Mothers. If you're strapped for resources, wouldn't it make sense to check out the rest of the solar system at least to see what you can use? You have a Star Destroyer. It's been damaged, but it looks like it's been repaired enough to travel across galaxies. You had to get that stuff from somewhere, and it can't just be cannibalizing TIE fighters. And honestly, you can't be that strapped for men and resources when you've got enough of them to paint designs on the bottom of the ship. So, what we're supposed to believe is that the master strategist Grand Admiral Thrawn just twiddled his thumbs for a decade and did nothing else. No exploring, no bridge building, no conquering. He just sat and waited for someone to save him, which brings up another issue. What is his plan? If he's this strapped for men and resources and is apparently out of the loop on the happenings in the other galaxy, what is he planning to do? He's just going to roll up on the New Republic with a busted ship and hope he'll win? We get nothing about his plan. Not a single word. The only hint we get are these boxes the troopers are loading onto the Star Destroyer, which will apparently take 3 days. It doesn't make any sense why they haven't already done this when they knew that Morgan was approaching. They could have just had them on the ship already. But that said, the boxes look like coffins, and from having watched Clone Wars, I'm gonna guess that these are the remains of the dead Night Sisters who the Great Mothers will resurrect once they get to the main galaxy. But I'm guessing because the show tells you nothing, which begs another question. What's the threat? Why should we be worried about Thrawn when we don't have a clue what he plans to do? Keep in mind, we're just 2 episodes from the end of the season, and we don't know what's at stake. Yeah, sure, okay. Meanwhile, Sabine argues with the Warg for ditching her, and it's supposed to be funny, but it goes on way too long. Eventually, she lets it follow her, and then it smells something and goes off in a certain direction. She follows, but it leads her to water. That is until it starts sniffing at a rock that turns out not to be a rock, but a tiny alien who just so happens to recognize the rebel symbol on her shoulder, and even has a pendant in the same shape. Turns out that there are a lot of these little guys, and they recognize the name Ezra Bridger, so they take Sabine back to their village. Now, you remember in Star Wars how Luke reacted after they'd blown up the first Death Star and Han came over to him? Remember the excitement in Luke's voice and how quickly he hugged Han out of joy that Han came back, even though the man had only been gone for a couple of hours? They embraced like they actually missed and cared about each other. Now, imagine literally flying from another galaxy to rescue your crush you haven't seen in a decade, and you've risked everything to get to. When you finally got the chance to see them, would you A, run and hug them so hard you'd almost choke them to death? B, run like a madman as you went to embrace your long-lost love? Or C, stand there casually chatting with each other like a dude just got you good playing the blanket in the doorway game? Because if you're Sabine, it's C. This is the most anticlimactic meeting I've ever seen. Cats are more excited to see their owners than Sabine was to finally get to Ezra. The whole show has been building up to this, and it's like, hey girl, hey, what you been up to? Nothing. Are you kidding me? Seriously. Just a quick little preview. In the next episode, within 30 seconds of a fight stopping, Ahsoka immediately goes to hug Ezra, and she hugs him like she actually missed him. So to recap, the woman who crossed 2 galaxies to get in this man's drawers barely has a reaction, but the woman who knew him for 2 minutes hugs him like he's long-lost family. What is this show? Speaking of which, who in their right mind asks, how did you get here? Gets the response, I don't really want to talk about it, and just lets it go. Because that's what Ezra does. He asks how Sabine found him. She says she doesn't want to talk about it. And he's like, okay. No, it's not okay. That's shady as hell. Something is definitely wrong. You don't let that go. But I'm sure when Ezra finds out what Sabine did, how she basically screwed the entire galaxy to get her man, I'm sure something will come of that. Like a talking to or an argument or some kind of negative response. It's not like the show's going to just sail right on by that. Right? Anyway, the show ends with the Great Mothers sensing Ahsoka's approach, and Thrawn ordering the space whales be killed on sight. You may notice that there's really not that much that's happened here, and you wouldn't be wrong. I felt that the Kenobi show would have made a better film, and the same is true with Ahsoka. There really isn't more than 2.5 hours of material here that the audience really needs to know. This could easily be pared down to a 150, maybe 180-minute long movie. That would at least make these threads that just aren't leading anywhere less noticeable. But that's also what's blowing my mind, because good writing should lead you to have some payoff for some of these in each episode. Instead, we're just teased with incomplete ideas, and worse, the show is completely wasting Baylan Skoll. He's legitimately the most interesting character whenever we get to see him, but he's barely given anything to do, and just in case you're wondering, no, you're never going to find out exactly what he's looking for. All this build up just to kind of have it all fizzle out. It really would be a pity if that's exactly how the season ends, but I'm sure that won't happen. Right? But what do I know? I'm just some guy.